everybody. We are very, very excited today. Francesca and I are very happy because we have the opportunity to interview somebody that has influenced our clinical practice to a very, very large extent. We have the opportunity to interview Michael Perelman. So most of you will probably already know that Michael Perelman made a very important contribution in our field because he actually conceptualized a model, the sexual tipping point model, that actually is a very, very useful tool in our clinical practice. So Michael Perelman has been working in the field for many years. He started his PhD at Columbia in the field of sex therapy in 1976. In those days, with Helen Kaplan together. So he has a lot of stories to tell us and a lot of important information to share with us.
Thanks.
So Michael, it's so great that we have you here and that we can ask you a few things because you have such long experience. So the first thing I would like to ask you is that in 1976, you did the first sex therapy doctoral dissertation in Columbia's history. So what inspired you to get involved in sex therapy research in those days? You were the first there.
Well, you know, it's interesting because the Vietnam War was going on here in the, in the United States. There was a draft. And I was fortunate enough that I had received a National Institute of Mental Health fellowship to go to Columbia. And I remember in the first course I was taking as a graduate student in quote unquote behavior therapy at that time, we had to do a book report. And Masters and Johnson had just come out with Human Sexual Inadequacy. So I was only 22 myself. So it's a different time. People were less independent and mature perhaps than people today with all that's available on the internet, et cetera. So like I raised my hand and asked permission, can I do my book report on human sexual inadequacy? And, the professors at, Perelman, you're an NIH fellow, we're paying you to like do whatever you want to do. That's the whole point of it, like whatever your interests are. So I came home and then told my girlfriend, now my wife, you can't believe this. They're like paying me to like become a sex expert. This is hysterical. I love this. So I just, I read that book and wrote a paper, and I wrote a few other papers and got a little more interested in it. And David Rubin had just written a book called Any Woman Can. So I wrote a term paper called For Those Who Haven't, because I thought he was ridiculously naive in his presentation. So I was thinking maybe I'll do something on female sexual response. And, as a young guy, I thought this is cool. I'm going to learn all about, women and sexual response. This is great. I'll have some use for this, I'm sure. And, but Cher Hite, who wrote the Hite Report, was also getting funding from the National Organization of Women. And she was at Columbia in a master's program in sociology. And this was in the middle of, sort of feminist era, if you will, where it was clear to me as a 22-year-old man, I don't want to be telling everybody I'm such a sex expert for women. So I decided I better pick something that is more of a young man's disorder than a woman's issue. When got Cher Hite, who I later appeared on television with, sort of debating a few things. We actually had a good time together. But at any rate, I decided I'd study premature ejaculation. And Helen Kaplan had just done a group treatment, the first group therapy study on treating premature ejaculation. And at that time, group treatments were very big because we had people coming back from the war, and the Veterans Administration was trying to figure out how can you treat more and more people. And at that point, there were so few sex therapists, the notion that if you could develop a group approach to treat a sexual disorder, that would be more efficient and you could reach more people. So I've been thinking, okay, I'm going to do a group. So I asked Helen if she would be on my dissertation committee. And unbeknownst to me at the time, her PhD was from Columbia. And she was a good student, but not a great student as a graduate student. So the idea that a graduate student, this young guy, was coming to her, asking her to be the outside reader for his committee was very flattering to her, which she told me later, but I didn't realize it at the time. I just called her and said, hi, can I come by? And I went to her office, and she was like in jeans with all these diplomas behind her, and I was so impressed. So she was going to be on my committee. And I just finished doing an internship at Duke at the time. I was a chief intern there. And I started working at a private institute, Behavior Therapy Institute in New York. And Ray Rosen was one of the people working there. So I asked Ray if he would also be on my committee as an outside reader. So I had Helen Kaplan and Ray Rosen as my outside readers at that point in time. And what I also thought, having just read this Masterson Johnson book, was that the notion that you always have to treat the couple, that you can't treat anyone alone, I thought that was sort of ridiculous, quite frankly. So I structured the dissertation to have two different groups of people. One that was a male-only group, and those guys went home and gave their partners the homework assignment. And another that was a couples group where the couples met together. And both turned out to be successful. And that's where I started thinking about this idea of like, is attendance always required, or is it cooperation that's required? So that's how all this got started.
So